I want you to think of your D&D character. Just pick one if you have a few. Since they started adventuring, how have they changed? I don't mean their ability score improvements or new spells or magic items. I'm not talking about leveling up, becoming more powerful. I'm not even talking about their achievements, the respect they've earned or the riches they've amassed or the allies they've gained. I'm talking about personal growth. How has the way your character thinks and acts changed since session 1? Some of you have a ready answer for this, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of you don't. And that's because character growth like this isn't built into D&D the way that growth of skills and resources are. It's not a mechanical part of the game. And if it doesn't interest you, you can totally ignore it. But if you're watching my channel, I suspect that you really enjoy roleplay and storytelling and character. And in that case, you might be missing out on something that brings complexity and realism to your characters and can make you feel more connected to your PC, more invested in the game overall, and more satisfied by its eventual conclusion. Most characters have their own individual plot arc. This is usually related to why they began adventuring. Maybe they're determined to find their true father, or avenge their wife's murder, or prove themselves worthy of leadership. But in many cases, it's possible to complete that quest and still have a flat character arc. By flat, I just mean their arc isn't positive or negative. They don't become a better person, they don't become a worse one, they just don't change. Imagine that you have a character whose personal quest is to pay off a long-standing family debt, freeing themselves and their relations from servitude. Now, they're not a perfect person. Maybe they're impulsive. They have a tendency to act before thinking. It is entirely possible for this character to pay off their debt or otherwise erase it and complete that quest without ever experiencing any character growth. Their mindset and personality could remain exactly the same. They might even experience consequences during roleplay for their snap decisions, but that doesn't affect their ability to gain levels and grow stronger. This character could be the same reckless person at level 20 as they were at level 1, just more powerful. I say all this because a character's personal growth might be tied to their quest, but it's not the same thing. For your character to grow, you have to be intentional about it. In most games, it doesn't happen by accident. I'm sure everyone completed the reading and is ready to discuss World Anvil. Who can remind us what it is? Wisteria?
World... Evil.
Anvil.
Anvil! Yeah, World Anvil is a... book?
It can be used if you're writing one. It's a world-building platform used to organize and keep track of everything you've created for your fictional world.
Yeah, I totally knew that.
Then I'm sure you'll be able to list 3 World Anvil features for the class.
Well, there's... Nope.
That's right, notes. You can use World Anvil to organize your notes about your world. Articles can be cross-linked easily, and there's even a mobile-friendly notebook to jot down thoughts on the go. What else?
Cool it! You're trapped!
Correct, maps. World Anvil allows you to not just upload maps, but make them interactive, with pins, layers, and even embedded maps for more detail. One more.
Shit!
Sheets, yes. Character sheets, stat blocks, all compatible with dozens of different game systems. And that's just a few of the features World Anvil offers. Make sure to check out the link in the description and use the code Ginny for 40% off any annual membership.
Great class today, Professor. I take my hat off to you.
Thank you, Wisteria. I'm sure you'll have no trouble with the test tomorrow.
Wait, test?
If you want your character to grow, they need to have room for growth. That is, they must be flawed. Obviously, D&D's ideals, bonds, and flaws system means you should already have at least one flaw identified. But not everybody fills that section out because, let's be honest, you don't actually need it to play. And role players who don't use the rolling tables to come up with their character backstory, who create in a more free-form way, might actually be less likely to specify a character flaw like this. But even if you do have a flaw in mind for your character, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're thinking about it much when you're actually playing. Take a moment to refresh your memory on your character's flaw. Did you have to check? Do you find this trait coming up in your roleplay much, or do you tend to forget it? Or do you have one at all? If you haven't done it yet, this is a good time to make sure you can articulate your character's main weakness in a few words. Even if you think you have a good grasp on the concept, writing it out as a specific statement can make it a more useful point of reference during the game. This is also a good time to consider your character's character's motivations and goals. Something must be standing between your character and their goal, otherwise it wouldn't be very compelling for the game. Often in D&D, the obstacle your character is facing is external, not internal. Your goal is to recover an important artifact that was stolen from your temple, or your goal is to rescue your sister who was kidnapped. But if you can make your flaw and your goal related, it'll be way easier to roleplay meaningful character growth during the course of that arc. Plus, choosing a flaw that compromises their ability to achieve their goals is a great way to make sure that it comes into play during the game. Maybe the journey to recover the stolen artifact is particularly difficult for your character because they're full of self-doubt and afraid that they're not good enough to serve their god in this way. Maybe your character's motivation to rescue their kidnapped sister is complicated by their guilt over the competitive relationship they have with their sister. There are rolling tables in the player's handbook where you can randomly generate flaws for your character if you want, but if you don't like those or are having trouble factoring your flaw into your character, then make sure to check out my video all about flaws, which I will link in the cards. Once you've identified your character's flaw, the next step is to use it as a guide for how your character interacts with the world. Of course, you'll want to use your bonds and ideals in the same way, but I want to focus on the flaw here because that's really where the opportunity for growth comes in. The more you incorporate those flaws into your roleplay, the more opportunities your character gets to learn from them and change as a result. For example, if your character's carelessness has a negative effect on a party member, they might feel guilty about that and consider the possible consequences of their choices more in the future. Or if your wizard meets an NPC who is a powerful caster, but they come off as entitled, vain, and unwilling to work to improve their skills, the NPC might refuse to do them any favors or give them access to their resources until they demonstrate respect for their craft. Just like in real life, mistakes and failures are opportunities for D&D characters to learn. If your character never does anything wrong, there isn't really a good reason to change. But if they make the wrong choice or do the wrong thing because of their weaknesses, they have an opportunity to recognize that weakness and work on it. Only by messing things up can we learn how to do better in the future. In turn, this allows you to turn those character flaws into character strengths. A character making careless mistakes and dealing with the fallout of those mistakes can change them into a person who is careful and thoughtful once they've seen the consequences firsthand. A character losing access or opportunities over their self-absorbed attitude can be humbled by their experiences over time. You might notice that in this video, I'm talking pretty much exclusively about positive character arcs, where a character becomes a better person, they improve. That's because at most tables, that's what's going to be fun for everyone. It is possible to have a negative character arc in which your character becomes a worse person, but you should only explore that if your whole table agrees that it would be enjoyable. At the vast majority of tables, the adventuring party is made up of heroes who are trying to do good. A negative character arc could cause a lot of problems in a game like that. Now, change happens slowly over time, and thankfully D&D gives us plenty of space to do that. Nobody changes overnight, and that includes your character. Don't feel pressure to orchestrate a complete arc during 1 or 2 sessions, and certainly don't feel like every single roleplay decision you make at the table has to be carefully guided by deep introspective character work. All you have to do to make personal growth part of your game is to occasionally touch base with your character's flaws, and pay attention to how their experiences throughout the game might change the way they approach the world in the future. It's okay if you only think about this stuff every 2 or 3 sessions. In fact, if all of this sounds a little overwhelming, you can even just make it part of your level up process. Whenever your character gains new abilities and skills, just take a moment to reflect on everything that's happened to them since their last level and ask yourself how those experiences would change their outlook and their actions. When you're intentionally invoking your character's flaws, you have to be careful that you're not making the game less fun. I have 3 warnings to keep in mind when you're focusing on character growth. First, your character's flaws shouldn't make the game less fun for you or for others at the table. If your flaw makes your behavior at the table annoying or constantly creates problems for the party, it might not be a good choice for a group role-playing experience. The easiest way to make sure you're not stepping on any toes is to just communicate with your party about it. Some groups would be fine with your character's flaws occasionally disadvantaging the group during combat or creating conflict with NPCs, but other groups might find that really frustrating. Role-playing your flaws can be funny, interesting, complex, and engaging, but it can also go too far and become annoying and obstructive. Try to be aware of when you're risking moving into that zone. Second, remember that you can't control what happens to your character. I think a lot of us make the mistake of coming to the table with our character's entire future arc mapped out already in our heads heads. But if we fall into this trap, actual gameplay can become pretty frustrating. Without knowing what your character is going to experience, you can't decide in advance how those experiences will affect them. Instead of thinking, I want my character to go through these changes and become this kind of person, try to focus on grasping their current personality so you can better understand how their experiences will reshape it. This is more about navigating the game with intention rather than forcing the game to fit your plans. It's normal for a character to experience setbacks on their arc, so don't be afraid to let events naturally guide your character's growth. And finally, make sure that you don't create a character who is only fun to play or play with once they've already experienced their growth. I see this all the time in tabletop communities. People will say that they created an antisocial character so that over time they can learn to trust their party and connect with their found family. But while this kind of plotline might sound like a meaningful emotional journey when you summarize it, in the end, you're still creating a character who is going to be antisocial for dozens or maybe hundreds of hours before enough time can pass in-game for them to really start to change. In a movie or a book, a character might start off pretty insufferable and still be fun to watch, but at the D&D table, some personality traits just suck for everyone else at the table to interact with while you're all waiting for that growth to happen. Be careful of creating a character who starts off selfish or mean or unfriendly, and then relying on time passing for that character to become palatable. You want everybody at the table to be having a good time from the first session. In short, if you want to explore character growth at the table, just make sure that you're doing it in a way that isn't going to be frustrating for you or for your party. In the end, it's still a game, and the primary goal is to have fun. Getting deep with your character's emotions and experiencing a meaningful journey with them over time can make the game more fun, as long as you read the room. It's a lot easier to experience character growth at the table with players who are also interested in that kind of game and committed to creating a roleplay-focused environment. If you feel like your party is open to this but not quite there yet, watch this video next. It's all about how you can encourage inter-party roleplay at your D&D table. This kind of gameplay works best if the other players are trying to roleplay character growth as well. Oh my god, my roots are so bad.